Hi y'all, this is Sharon Day from Ghost Hunting Theories, and today I'm going to discuss what happened to the ancient giants. Where did they go? Why can't we find them? I don't know, maybe we should discuss that with the Smithsonian. It's a hot topic, and people wonder, why? Why aren't they still walking the earth? What happened? Did disease get them? Did they go the way of the Neanderthal? Were they bred out of the population? What happened? I have my own theories on how this all went down. I believe that the ancient giants, or what I like to call the originators, were a civilization of humanity related to us, but not in our Homo sapiens category. And this group of people either came from Africa or Asia. I tend to think Asia, but wherever they came from, they emerged much earlier than us, hundreds of thousands of years earlier, which gave them quite a jump start. I want you to imagine us 100,000 years or 200,000 years ago and how we are today, and imagine how civilized we are. They were sort of gods to humanity as we crawled out of Africa 60,000 years ago. We encountered them as we went around the world, and I don't think that we spread around the world in quite the way that we've been taught in books to simplify it and say that we walked across great sheets of ice thousands of miles. I believe we were begged, borrowed, and stolen and brought as slave labor, basically. And so our indigenous people were raised in slave labor situations in which they were maybe taken to lands that they didn't know how to get to, traverse, other than these giants bringing them. I want you to take a thought about the movie Planet of the Apes and the way in which humans and the gorillas and apes, orangutans, how they all handled each other. So we have a situation here where we crawled out of Africa 60,000 years ago with very little tools and knowledge. What we had sort of cobbled and stolen from Heidelbergensis, Neanderthal, others who had come before us, who taught us things about symbols and spirituality and such. But we encountered these giant beings who were bigger, stronger, different looking than us, what we would call pointed heads, powerful jaws, carnivorous beings. Being carnivorous, they were also predatory, so hence we get the talk of them being cannibalistic. And I think that also might have been the origins of man's desire to sacrifice to the gods and to bind their babies' heads to make them pointed. And we see this in indigenous cultures, as well as wearing spools in the ears, or what those on Easter Island used to call the long ears. And those in Peru also described having spools in their ears of the giants. These giants, I believe, they spread out over time. They were way ahead of us, so they took to the waters and they went to the South Seas, South Pacific, and into Australia. They went across to Peru and to Argentina and entered the Americas. What I see here is a pattern with them in which different people coming out of Africa, especially in Asia and Europe, drove out, killed, or tried to take advantage of the giants in any way they could to have their things. They had all these cool things, they wanted them. And some of them were brought into slave labor, no doubt, in which there were rebellions. This is also told in the stories of Peru, in which they say they landed on their waters and built wells that were tarred with amazing substance that kept them waterproof and sealed, and that these giants had amazing technology, but they also were hungry for flesh and for women. So the locals had to eventually kill them, drive them out. And what I think happened is that they simply got moved up further into the Americas. And I think that the very last place you would find the ancient giants would have been America. And that was the last fighting ground in which the people like the Paiutes and the Cherokee and the Lenni-Lenape, spoke of having driven them off, killed them, and confronted them, driving them down the Mississippi and into the Sierras. And what we have here is giants being left in a country in which we complain of having giants in our woods in these same places, in the southern Mississippi area and in the Ohio Valley area and up in the Pacific Northwest. And these are just the places where they were driven out. And in fact, the Northwest Indians bound their heads to make them pointed. So I think what we have here is the very last stand for the giants was in America. And the reason that we have what we call Sasquatch is we are still housing the remnants of their culture. And these people no doubt have carried down legends among themselves about us and our intentions toward them. And it's created what we wonder, why America? Why do we have Sasquatch? And Mexico's not complaining about it. Well, this was the last ground, I think, that the giants possessed, and the last fight that they had in them, and what was left of their culture, they tried to survive. And we have many thousands of years of them living in feral conditions, in which, of course, their body hair was covering their bodies, an adaptation that would be absolutely acceptable. So this is how I see it. Of course, nobody else is going to have that same conclusion. And like I often say when I tell you about these things, that this is the conclusions I've come to from my own education, my own way of seeing things, and my own way of making associations. But it does make you wonder how many cultures have been before us, and I do believe that the originators were not the true originators. I think if we go back far enough, there may have been many, many millions of years of different cultures trying to survive on this earth. And I would even hazard to guess that perhaps the alien greys were one of them. So that is my story, and I'm sticking to it.